bunch of different ways to skin a deer, and I've often thought the easiest way was to get Kenny to do it for me. But today I'm going to do it myself. And I have this little gambrel I use. It just separates the hindquarters pretty nicely. Just like that. At this point I'm going to switch knives, because while this little tiny blade was really good for gutting this animal, something with a rounded blade, like this one, it's got a nice curve to it. It makes it much easier to take the hide off. And essentially, I'm just going to cut underneath the skin, right through the back. I'm going to take and cut up these hams. And one of the things you may notice is that I always cut from the meat side out. Now, I don't know how many of you like eating hairy meat, but it's not very, to me, it's not very attractive. And you should try to minimize the amount of hair that you put on the meat, and you can do that when you're butchering it. So I always run the blade from the meat side out, and that way I minimize the amount of hair that I'm going to have to deal with later on. And the same thing on the other leg. Now, lots of times when we're doing this, it's a little bit more difficult than when you're doing it at your house, because the meat is still, this animal's still warm. I mean, Kenny just killed it at the game farm or the wildlife center just a little while ago. So, ideally, we'd leave this animal hang before we started the processing part of it. I watched a show one time, and they had a chef from this big 5-star restaurant in New York City, and she would leave that meat hang for, oh gosh, 10 to 12 days in her cooler before they even thought about doing anything with it. So I usually leave mine hang in the garage. As long as it's below 40 degrees, I'll leave that thing hang for, oh gosh, if I can, five days or more, because it'll age. And you don't need to take the hide off of it, because when you do, you allow the meat to dry out, and there's no reason to do that. And essentially, you are now just skinning the way down on the deer until you get down to the neck. And speaking of which, since I'm doing it upside down, I'm going to go ahead and run these front legs out. Go ahead and cut up. Run the legs out. And this will just make skinning the rest of it easier, because what's going to happen is the hide is actually going to come over this. And if you don't do this, you're going to get down to the end and wonder what it is that you do to get the rest of the hide off the deer. Now, Kenny skins his, and he's really the expert here on skinning. He skins his the other way. He skins his head side up. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't care for it because to me, the best cuts of meat are the hams and the back straps, and I have access to it a little easier skinning it this goofing around with the truck, and you can do that with a four-wheeler or something like that by doing it head first, making your cut around the neck here, roll the ears under, go ahead and make the same cuts that I did before in this Y pattern, and then just hook your rope right to where the ears are rolled underneath the hide. Tie your rope around it and tie it to your car or your truck and just gently pull the hide off. And that works pretty slick too. You just want to make sure your rafters are good and secure. Alright. We'll have this done in just a minute. Okay, now, I usually do a little bit of lecturing on making sure that you minimize the amount of hair that you put in this meat. And you got to keep in mind, sometimes if you're wanting people to eat this stuff, that it's got to be clean. And if you're not careful, you'll make this not a good impression for the people that are doing this, to eat it. So you want to make sure everything is as clean as you can get it. Once this is skinned out, the first thing I'm going to do is cut the back straps out, because that's the part that's going to be the best cut on this. And that's essentially where like your pork chops are on a pig. And I'm just about done. It's done as much as I'm going to do. I usually keep a wet towel, damp towel, somewhere nearby, so I can just wipe my hands on it instead of my pants. Because as you go, if you have little pieces of deer fur on here, you can kind of pick them off, as you work. Now on these deer, they've got an awful lot of fat right here on the top of the rump. The last thing that you want to do is cut up and try to serve a bunch of deer. Thanks, Kenny. It's got fat all over it. It's away from the appearance of the venison. That fat doesn't taste good. In fact, the Indians used to use that fat for their candles. They called it tallow. So you want to cut as much of that fat off as you can. Once you're done and everything's deboned, you should just probably find a place that you can put this back in the woods. I would encourage you, if you're putting it, out on the farm, don't put it back in a trash bag. Just carry it out there and set it back out in the woods, because the coyotes and other animals will come in and make pretty short work of it. And that's pretty much it. A normal deer will take me about 2 hours, 2.5 hours to process, because I'm very meticulous on what I'm going to put in a package for somebody to eat. There's going to be very, very little fat, sinew, and no hair left back on this animal. So plan on spending about 2 and 2.5 hours to do this when you do it at the house. But I guarantee you, when you do it yourself, you're going to know what's going in those bags, whereas when it goes to the processor, you don't necessarily know. And you went through all the time and trouble and effort to kill the deer properly, to hang it, to make sure you didn't get bacteria all over it, to make sure it wasn't spoiled. So take the extra step and work the deer up yourself. You'll be glad you did.